Hello everyone and welcome back to episode 8 of our series on painting A Song of Ice and Fire tabletop game miniatures. In this series we've been painting Bronn the Mercenary, Jaime Lannister as a prisoner, and Cersei Lannister. And so far we are very close to being done. Last episode we did some really cool work with putting together some cobblestones for Cersei's base to differentiate her from those characters that are going to be in the field fighting. And in this episode we're going to be finishing off those bases, varnishing the miniatures, and then throwing a little bit of a black edge around them to make everything look a lot cleaner and finished off. To do the flocking, we're going to be using Mod Podge Matte and this Woodland Scenics medium green flock, both of which are normally available at local craft stores. I think Mod Podge is even available at Walmart if you have those nearby. And also available online. If you'd like to purchase items online for yourself because you haven't been able to find them locally, then please see down below in the description. I have Amazon affiliate links to all of the material I use, so if you want to use the same airbrush, the same glue, the same flock, the same inks, any of that, they are available through Amazon.ca. As an Amazon affiliate, I will receive compensation from any qualifying purchases you make, so that could be a way to support the channel while picking up any items that aren't available in your hometown. That being said, if it's available locally, definitely compare the prices and get whatever works best for you. What we're doing right now is we're just putting some Mod Podge, this matte Mod Podge glue, onto the bases in a little patchy pattern, and now I've grabbed a big clump of static grass between my fingers and I'm dabbing it on. What this means is that instead of just letting it fall and land sideways or otherwise sort of it just landing in the glue and sticking out however it wants to, I'm sort of forcing all of the strands to point forwards and pressing them into the glue, helping the grass stay a little 3D and point upwards once it sets. What I also have on hand, as you can see, is a large soft brush that I'm going to be using to wipe away any flock that gets stuck to the miniature as we do this. The surface of these miniatures, having been inked, is kind of sticky or a little bit tacky, you may have noticed if you're following along. So flock is really going to want to stick to them. I recommend also having a set of tweezers for pulling out any flock that gets stuck into annoying little crevices, like for example under Jaime's cloak back there. Here again I'm going to start applying my Mod Podge, just sort of in a patchy pattern wherever I want flock to really stick to. Since our texture gel that we've used here is so chunky, I guess, it leaves us a really visible pattern on the ground, and so I'm building up my Mod Podge around it to take advantage of the fact that that sort of ground clutter, that debris, the gravel, or whatever we want it to be, is going to be visible in between and should give some sort of relief, some 3D effect to these bases. Once I've put the Mod Podge into place, again, I grab a pinch of the flock, hold it very tight between my fingers, and dab it on, trying to make sure that as many of the strands as possible are touching down just with their base, their ends, if that makes any sense, so that they'll be sticking out rather than pressing them in flat, which they would probably do if I just dropped them from the air and they fluttered down, or if I was pushing too hard with them. Just do a little dabbing motion, and when you feel that the ends of them are getting stuck in the glue, back off. It's worth mentioning at this point that some hobbyists also have what's called a static grass applicator that you can use to make the grass stand up vertically through the magic of static electricity. I don't have one of those. Apparently you can make them at home, so I'd like to do that in the future, but I haven't yet, so this is my workaround for making the grass still have some verticality. The next thing we're going to be doing is working on Cersei's base, once again. Her base has taken up quite a bit of our time in this video, but even then, as you can see from the video timelines, it really hasn't taken all that long, and I'm pretty happy with where it's coming out. To finish it off here, before we get onto the varnishing, I'm just going to be mixing together some black ink and some white acrylic paint. The combination of these will make a white acrylic paint that's slightly thinned out into a gray. I like mixing inks and acrylics, and recently I've actually started doing it more and more because it can give the ink a little bit of a richer color while thinning out the acrylic paint at the same time with all of that medium that's in the ink. Especially since our inks have quite vivid colors, but in some cases just lay on just a little too thin on the first layer or two. Mixing these two together, I now have a mixture of really light gray, which I'm going to be overbrushing onto Cersei's base. Overbrushing is a little like the dry brushing we've been doing before, except I'm not making sure that the brush is fully dry. I've actually left quite a bit of the gray on because I really do want to be catching all of the raised surfaces on these guys, not just the really sharp edges across the base. As I go around the base, you can see it's laying on quite a bit of gray, and the only parts that are getting missed are the deepest crevices. This will give everything a really worn, rocky look, like all of the surfaces have been walked on or scraped, or things have been dragged across them, that kind of thing. While the stone underneath is still kind of gray. I wouldn't say it necessarily resembles any actual stone I've ever seen, but it does look sort of like the stereotypical cartoony stone of a castle, and that was kind of what I was going for with those flagstones as well, so I'm pretty happy with the end result. I really like how it looks on Cersei's base. In the future, I'm going to be experimenting with different ways to do these stony bases, but that will be the theme for all my non-combat units. Going on with Varnish, we have the Liquitex Matte Varnish. I've just found this to be a really effective varnish, whether it's applied with a brush or applied through an airbrush. If you apply it with a brush, the big thing you're going to want to watch out for is pooling. These Liquitex varnishes, and most other varnishes that I've ever worked with, have a tendency to turn a little cloudy once they've pooled in any locations, whether it's a matte or a gloss varnish. So if you are applying them with a standard brush, make sure to have another brush on hand to wick away any pooling as you go forward. With the airbrush here, you can kind of see I'm applying from a long distance and just dusting the varnish across their surfaces. I basically just do this with anything I'm applying with an airbrush. I'm just doing general application. I don't do a lot of specific detail work with an airbrush, although I have seen some people have very nice effect with that on YouTube. For me, it's largely just about a quick way to cover up as many things as possible in as little time as possible. In this case, I've taken my stands, which I made by hot gluing some corks together in Jamie and Braun's case, and I've sticky tacked them all down to this little maple syrup box just to raise them up to a more convenient level. And I'm just running the airbrush across all three miniatures, left to right, right to left, making sure I've covered all surfaces with matte varnish without putting on too much. Especially where a matte varnish is concerned, you're actually going to see a change in the surface of the miniature very quickly as it gets a little bit matte. And then very, very shortly after that, as you can see on Jamie's shoulder, what just happened there, is they'll get a little bit glossy. That means that you put on almost too much, probably, for one coat. Since you want to be getting a matte effect and you don't want any pooling, and the real advantage of the airbrush is my ability to put on very, very thin layers as it vaporizes the varnish, I'm basically looking for the moment where the miniatures start to look a little bit glossy again, which is to say now they're sort of moist with the matte varnish, and that's when I'm moving on to the next one, or stopping this run. I'm sort of underfilling my airbrush right now because I'm trying not to overuse my varnish, but obviously you could put in a little more and not have to reload as often as I do. Just make sure you go through and catch all of the surfaces of the miniatures, because any areas that are glossy will sort of stand out alongside the others. And the ink does have quite a bit of gloss if it isn't finished. One thing you could do if you run into that issue, however, is grab that Mod Podge that we used in the last step, the matte Mod Podge glue. It also works, sort of, as a varnish. Please ignore me cleaning up my mess here as I knock my miniatures over. In the future, I do actually transition away from just placing every miniature on a stand here and just putting on a rubber glove on my left hand and holding them up in front of the airbrush instead. It does mean that it takes a little bit more time than doing them all side by each like this, but it does avoid miniatures falling over, and it gets rid of the need for this cardboard box of maple syrup to stamp them on. That being said, what I was getting at earlier is if you use matte Mod Podge and apply it over an area that didn't get a good varnishing, you can actually use that as a way to bring down the surface to a matte texture. I show it a little bit in my previous season when we're working on the Blackfish's horse, so go look back there if you want to see an example of it. The last thing we're going to be doing in this episode is we're going to be moving on to edging the bases. Edging the bases is just a really good way to cover up any mistakes we made, any overfill we did, and also make our miniatures stand out a little bit from the tabletop. Optionally, you could also decide to edge them with a different color than black to make them stand out a little bit less. I've seen people who do their base edging in brown, which makes it blend a little bit like a corky brown, sort of like we used earlier on our bases. Or you could do it in green, which is a very traditional way for toy soldiers, for example. Many toy soldiers had their bases just sort of a flat olive green. Whatever you do, I do recommend that you do something to edge the bases so that you can cover up any overspill that you've done with your inks earlier when we were coloring the base, and also so that you can just make everything look a little bit more standardized and finished. Certainly for a while when I was just worried about getting miniatures on the table to play, I just didn't bother with this because I said I didn't like bases anyway. But now that I've sort of resigned myself to the idea of textured bases, because honestly they do make your character pop a little bit better in my opinion than, well, anything else I tried, I do put in the extra step to finish them off and put the edging on there. It makes them look like game pieces, sold game pieces, if that makes sense, professional ones, rather than just something you boshed some paint onto so you could get a game onto the table. I had previously experimented with all sorts of different basing because I thought, personally, I was having a hard time abstracting the idea that, oh, okay, now my miniature's standing on grass, but I've moved him into a building. But I found that either the conversion work to get miniatures onto acrylic bases wasn't worth it, and also the price of acrylic bases compared to your little 25mm black ones that are, old Games Workshop style, wasn't worth it either. So now for all of my miniatures that aren't, like these A Song of Ice and Fire miniatures conveniently brought in on their own base, I just glue them onto bulk bought black plastic 25mm round bases. I find that more than adequate for all of my uses, but it also still requires edging on the bases to make them look finished and complete, because the base itself, with the texturing, is just going to stand out a little bit. This black edging on the bases also helps with me abstracting that sort of difference between the character's base and the floor they're standing on. Obviously, the black means that this is a little diorama. It doesn't try to make them blend in, where obviously Jamie there, for example, with his grassy base, would not blend in well if we were playing inside of a cottage or something. Although I don't think the Song of Ice and Fire tabletop game actually has rules for buildings, oddly enough. Well, not oddly, I guess, if it's for field battles. But I digress a little bit. Just carry on with putting this black ring on. The Song of Ice and Fire tabletop game miniatures are actually kind of convenient to put this black ring on because they've got that sort of circle of textured ground on top of them to make sure to grab any cat hairs or pieces of flock that you find while you're doing this. But they have that circle of textured ground on top of the base, so you can just make sure you're putting your black all the way up to the edge of that circle of textured ground, and all of your base edging should be roughly the same dimensions and roughly similar in appearance. And now with all that being said, we've finally reached the end of this episode. It wasn't a very long episode, and neither is next one, but I'm actually away for work for a few weeks here, so oh geez. So I apologize for sort of shortening down the episodes and working on that, but I'll be back to it shortly thereafter. And I really hope you've enjoyed watching this and you've learned something. I was really happy to see some comments recently to show that I've been able to help some people. I love that. That's super rewarding. If you have anything you want to see, if you've got any questions about what I do at all, throw them down in the comments. Like I said, I'm going to be traveling for work for a little while, so I may not answer you immediately, but I swear I will get back to you. And yeah, any suggestions, throw them down there as well. Thanks very much for watching, and until next time, go play some games.